All right, welcome back to another installment of Drive Home Reviews is All Elite, proudly striving to be the least viewed wrestling review show on YouTube, and we are doing great at that goal. So, last night was a pivotal Dynamite for the company as they're coming off not just their pay-per-view, but the huge scandal. I don't know if scandal is the right word. The melee, the issues, the drama that all unfolded afterwards. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then, and you're a wrestling fan, then where have you been, basically? So I'm not going to recount everything that went on, but we do need to talk about the aftermath. So this was a big deal for the company. Of course, they suspended a huge number of people, such as the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega. The fate of CM Punk is very much up in the air right now, and they were supposed to have an announcement on that yesterday, but so far I have not heard anything. It's very possible by the time I get to work and upload this video, there'll be 500 new videos about what the fate of Punk is, but we do know that they're off TV for the time being. And Tony Khan starts the episode out coming out and saying that he's vacated all of their championships. So the newly won Trios title, which literally just had their inaugural champions at the pay-per-view, and the brand new AEW World Champion stripped of their belts. So not the most auspicious way to start the Trios title reign. I'll comment on this really quick. I know Tony Khan rightfully has been getting a lot of shit lately. And again, not without cause. And people have been saying, myself included, that he needs to, Vince McMahon up a little bit. As much as, no matter what you might think of Vince McMahon, he was the boss. And Tony Khan needed to grow his balls a bit and handle this. And so far, at least to me, it feels like he's handling it the best way he can. It is a very tricky situation. And I think for that tricky situation, he's doing the best job and making the best decisions that he can at the moment. We'll see if that tracks. We'll see what happens with Mr. Cry and Moan Punk, but I think stripping all the belts outright and none of this interim champion crap, just saying, no, you're done. We're going to have new champions, and you got to start back at the bottom when you come back, if you come back. I think that was the way to go. So he set up a championship match for the Trios title that night and outlined this really great tournament. Like, I love the tournament for the vacated championship. I think that it's a really stacked bracket, so I'm all for it. So this is the extent to which they kind of dealt with the issue, and I like the way they did it. I really do. So of course the guy who got overshadowed at All Out starts out the show. MJF comes out, and he's coming out being very non-MJF. They're in Buffalo, so he comes out wearing a Bills jersey. And, he's playing to the fans. He's like, oh, I love it here in Buffalo. Oh, and I love AEW, and I'm never leaving, and I love all of this and all of you. And he's going on, and it's very tongue-in-cheek, and you can tell he's not sincere in the least. And out comes Moxley. And MJF immediately turns on a dime and goes back to his old MJF self with, I don't care about this place. I don't care about these fans. I see the AEW title as a bargaining chip for when my contract is up. And, he plays up the WWE, which was really interesting. Buries Tony Khan and, AEW as a whole. And then Moxley basically shoos him out of the ring and cuts probably the greatest promo I've ever heard. And Moxley has given some outstanding promos in his time in AEW. This one was like, it was so good. And I'm not a promo guy. Honestly, I want to watch wrestling. I don't usually care how good of a promo a guy does. I want to see wrestling. I'm not a fan of them opening the shows with promos. That rhymes. I want to see them open the show with a fight like they usually do. But they needed to do this. So here's what I realized, and this was brilliantly done. Because the subtext is brilliant. And again, you don't normally think of subtext with wrestling promos. The two things don't normally go together. But there is a lot of subtext, because when you really look at it, MJF is playing the part of CM Punk. He's playing the public perception of CM Punk, a guy who comes back and is all smiles and all playing to the crowd and doing everything to get the crowd on his side, you know, the whole, oh, we are Chicago and all of that. But underneath, and again, I don't know if this is true of the man, I'm just saying this is the public perception of him at the time, at this moment. But underneath that, it is I don't care about this place. I'm in it for the money. I'm in it for me. I think everybody should be praising me. And you all can basically sit and spin. I don't care. And Moxley is playing the part of Moxley, basically doing what a real locker room leader does and rallies the troops and says, yeah, we have some hard times. I'm sick of what's going on. I'm sick of the bullshit, and we need to get past all this and right the ship. And again, I'm summarizing. This promo was electric. Like, you felt it as a fan. And I really feel, this is the weird thing, this is the weirdest comment, but it felt to me watching this show like there was a fire that was reignited in the AEW locker room, just from the on-stage production, just from the matches. Again, I said this last week, but regardless of the backstage drama, I still feel AEW has the best matches and puts on the best on-screen product of any wrestling company, period, full stop. But they got to clean up the backstage drama. And I feel like the impression I got from watching this show is that the locker room is ready to bury all of this and move on. You know, because it really felt, looking at this, like there was that fire. I remember the first couple episodes, the first year or so of Dynamite, and that fire that a lot of these guys had in their matches. This fire and this desire to prove we're worthy, we're on the same level. The guys like Moxley and Jericho, who came from other places and were saying, I still have something to offer. I'm more than what you've been perceiving me as. It really felt like they had something to prove, like they had a chip on their shoulder. And I remember that really translating to the on-screen product. And I felt that again last night. It looked to me like everybody went out there and was fired up and was ready to kind of say, we're sick of the bullshit too. We have a great product, and we're going to clean up what's going on backstage and remind you of why we're so great. Now, whether or not that actually comes to pass remains to be seen. Again, we do not know the fate of CM Punk at this moment in time. I'll talk about my opinions on that in a minute. But I don't know. It just felt like maybe, and this sounds so stupid, maybe that backstage melee was a good thing in retrospect. Maybe it was one of those turning points where all this shit finally came to a head and everybody is now finally sick and tired of it, and they're ready to kind of say, all right, we're done with this crap. Let's finish it, let's put it behind us, and let's get back to doing what we did and what we do so well. That's what the show felt like to me. The show felt very, very energized. and the talent seemed very, very energized. And the matches were their usual standard of great, but there just felt like there was an extra spark. So you had Death Triangle versus the Best Friends and Orange Cassidy for the vacated trios titles, which Death Triangle won. Great match. The Best Friends, kind of like I said about Dark Order and the Acclaimed in my All Out review, is that they are constantly underrated and kind of passed over. And they are a great tag team, and they put on really good matches, and they work really well with Death Triangle, because the match was phenomenal. And yeah, I think giving it to Death Triangle was the way to go. Other great matches, you had Toni Storm versus Penelope Ford, which was not a great match. Poor Penelope Ford and Chris Sabian, no matter how many times they rejigger their gimmicks, they just can't seem to get any traction. They're still jobbers, basically, which I don't think is fair. But even though it was your typical kind of, I don't want to say squash match, but it was a pretty predictable match, it still felt like Penelope and Toni Storm were coming at it with a lot of fire. Like, they were really laying in, to me. And again, kind of going back to that initial thesis statement of that just felt like the evening in a nutshell. Definitely show-stealing match was the first match in this new tournament to crown the champion, Bryan Danielson, I can never get his name straight, and Hangman Adam Page. The guy who, I have to say, has been, I think, handling all of this like the most like a professional. He never fired back at CM Punk for all the remarks. Apparently he had already left the building, so he wasn't involved with the melee, and he hasn't commented. He's just there doing his job. You know, so say what you will about Hangman Page, but it seems like he's the only one handling any of this like an actual adult. But anyway, so Bryan and Page had an amazing match because they're Bryan and Page, and they work really great together, as demonstrated early on in Page's run. Yeah, they just had a baller. It was phenomenal, with Bryan coming out on top. What was interesting about this match is the fans, I don't know, the fans seemed a little divided. They were booing a bit during the match. I don't know if they were booing Page, if they were booing Bryan, if they were booing, I don't know, just booing to boo. I don't know. I was kind of confused by that. I think they may have been booing Page, which is going to be interesting to see kind of what they do with that. But regardless, the match was really, really good. So the night closes out with Wheeler Yuta versus Daniel Garcia for the ROH Pure Championship, which, on a side note, I'm really wondering where they're at with getting ROH their own time slot. I honestly think that if they can't do it, they should just turn Rampage into the ROH show, to be completely honest. But that's beside the point. This was a great match, and I know that, well, it was a good match. Great's being a little generous. It was definitely designed to send the fans home happy, because Daniel Garcia is from Buffalo, and he wins the title at the end. But if you're not familiar with the concept of an ROH Pure match, it's much more technical. It's much more mat-based. They've got specific rules, like you can only use a rope break 3 times, and then you can't do it anymore. If you hit with a closed fist, you get a warning, and then if you do it again, you're disqualified, and you can lose the title on a disqualification. Yeah, so it's meant to be a little bit more of a pure wrestling match. So those are great, and I saw a couple of them on ROH TV before they closed up, and they're good, and they're interesting, and they're a neat kind of a different style of match. Thing is, I don't know if this is what I would have closed the show with, because pure matches tend to be a little slower paced. And I get, again, they were trying to send everybody home happy with Daniel Garcia winning. But I feel like it would have been a smarter idea to close it with Paige versus Bryan. I feel that was a more fast-paced, more up-tempo match that, to me, just seemed better fitted for the main event. That's just my opinion. It was still a good match, and, good for Garcia finally kind of getting a push and finally kind of maybe stepping out of the shadow a little bit. You do feel a bit like he's just being used as kind of a pawn in the bigger story of Jericho and Bryan. So, I don't know. It kind of felt like that. I felt like the air kind of got sucked out of it a little bit at the end, because, of course, it's setting up for Bryan and Jericho's match next week as part of the championship tournament. So, yeah, I wouldn't have ended the show with it, personally. But all in all, I think the show was pretty good. They needed to address some issues. They needed to address the situation, and I think they did that both in a direct way and in an indirect way. I thought the dueling promos between Moxley and MJF were, again, great subtext, talking about the issues that everyone is having without naming names. So it's going to be interesting to see what this punkless and eliteless AEW looks like for however long these suspensions are in place. They've edited all of them out of the opening. So, I'm getting the feeling these are going to be some pretty lengthy suspensions. But we'll see kind of what happens when everybody comes back. Again, we have not yet heard what the story is with Punk. And just as I'm almost at work, I'm going to wrap this up. My thoughts on it, on what to do with Punk personally, speaking from a strictly business perspective, I'd hate to lose him. He is a draw. He is a name. And he is, he is news. You got to admit that. And he's a great wrestler. Again, you got to admit that. You might not like the man. I don't like the man, but you have to kind of give the devil his due. And I'm one of these people that I'm always thinking of giving someone a second chance, of giving someone an opportunity to kind of learn from mistakes. So if they brought him back, I don't think I'd necessarily mind it so much as he kind of stayed out of the main event scene, or if they put him in there in the main event, he would put the other guy over, which is not something he's done a lot. He did it for MJF, but in a kind of, backhanded kind of way. He hasn't put anybody over since he's been there, except Moxley, but that was all in service to put himself over later on. So anyway, in the best of both, in the best world, in the best of situations, I would hope that Punk would be able to learn from his mistakes and maybe grow up a bit and say, okay, I'm going to come back, but no interviews, don't badmouth the company, or fellow employees or talent. You got a problem, take it to the boss or something like that. Handle it like a professional. And I'd like to think that maybe this might be a wake-up call to him that you can't handle these things like some angry punk anymore. If you want to be a locker room leader, then you need to act like a locker room leader and not just declare yourself a locker room leader. I'd like to believe that, but history is not on my side. I don't think Punk is going to change. I don't think he is. And it's not to say he's completely at fault. The Bucks and Omega, they bear guilt for this too, but they're being suspended. They're serving their time. This is also the only time we've ever heard of anything like this from them. They have not, publicly dissed the company. Even when Cody left, they didn't bury him. They said, we're disappointed. He's our friend. We're sorry that, he saw the company going one way and we see it going another, but we wish him the best. They didn't go on there and bury him. They let him go. So I'm a little bit more inclined to side with the Punks and Omega here and say that, if Punk can reel it in and, again, grow the fuck up, then, yeah, he'd be great to have there. And if he can fall in line and actually, again, be a leader instead of just declaring himself a leader, I'd be all for it. But I don't feel that's going to happen. The man seems incapable of taking responsibility for his role in various shenanigans. And I just feel like if they bring him back, this is gonna happen again. It's, I do feel like in the end, the best thing may be to part company with him. And maybe that'll serve as a wake-up call. Maybe you can bring him back a year or two down the line when he's had some time to think about it and maybe mature, but I don't know. So that's me. All in all, a good show. I think they handled everything as best as you could. And again, the on-screen action is always great. So there you have it. That's my review for AEW Dynamite from last night. All right, so thank you all for joining me, or not. Thanks for coming along. And as always, drive safe, and I'll see you at the arena. I don't know if I like that.